Hello everybody in YouTube land and welcome to another ARKHAM Horror video. Today I'm going to be talking about the mulligan. What you should think about when you're taking a mulligan, how you should approach your mulligan, what cards should you keep, and kind of like how to handle the mulligan itself. The mulligan is a very tricky thing to master, but it's arguably one of the most important decisions you're going to be making in an ARKHAM Horror scenario. Your mulligan is going to determine the pace at which you are able to start the scenario and immediately give you an explanation, so it's like basically an example of how your tempo is going to go for the remainder of the scenario. Mulliganing is very crucial, and a good mulligan versus a bad mulligan can be absolutely soul-crushing. I had a video that I released earlier, I'll link it. It is how do you stabilize from a bad mulligan, but in this video I'm hoping to just kind of like nip that in the bud and just say, hey, but what if your mulligan was actually just really damn good at the get-go? I'm going to give you some kind of thought process that I go with my mulligans, what I'm looking for, when you should be aggressive, when you should kind of be more assertive with your mulligans. I know that sounds like a weird thing because that's kind of just how you deal with people, but the mulligan is really just a person in the room trying to stop you from having the best start, but also trying to help you have the best start. They're very wishy-washy, so how do you like handle that? I will also say that Dare BK on Ancient Evils just released an article about mulligans. Apparently great minds think alike. I was hoping to make this video, I was thinking about this video for the last little bit, but I will link Dare BK's article because, you know, it is good stuff and there's a lot to discover there. But what we're going to do in this video is I have 5 decks, one from each class, and then they get kind of more increasingly complicated as we get further in. So we're starting with literally a new player deck for Lucius Galloway. We're then going to be going to a current deck that I built, an old current, a Drowned City current that I built with for Skids O'Toole. Then I have this Dark Matter kind of flexy Miguel deck. Then I have this absolutely ridiculous support deck that I brought for Carson Sinclair. And then we're also going to be talking about, this one's kind of nice because we have a card that actually can really hurt your mulligan. So something to consider here as well. And then last but not least, I have a campaign play-along parallel gym deck that I brought when I played the Innsmouth play along a few seasons ago with Head Librarian Chad from the Restricted Collection. And this deck is easily the most complicated one we have here, so we're going to be talking about all these decks. We're going to be doing some test mulligans, and we're going to kind of like talk through how these work and the decisions that we make while we are mulliganing. So let's start with a new player deck for Lucius Galloway. So this was built with only the original core, so not the new core, and the Drowned City player card expansion, because that's where Lucius Galloway is from, and that's how we do these new player decks. The goal of this deck is actually relatively simple, and the reason why I am talking about the goal of this deck, or alternatively the role of this deck, so there are 4 roles in ARKHAM Horror. There is the fighter, your job is to kill enemies. There is the clover, your job is to get clues. There is the flex, you're kind of there to do a little bit of both and solve the problems that they show up. And then last but not least, there is the support, where you are trying to make everybody else do better, but you're also trying to get clues or fight enemies in the process. You can't just do nothing as a support, especially in 3 players, but some consideration for where the support comes in. Your main goal is to make everybody else succeed, but you're also kind of a flex, so just something that I think is very important. The reason why I'm talking about the role is because that is actually going to be the first major thing that dictates the choice that we are going to make for our mulligan. Because Lucius Galloway in this role is a clover, but a little bit of a flex, because you can see with the limited collection, there's this backstab here. We're going to be making use of our high foot score to good effect. But also because we can evade enemies with Lucius Galloway, which you actually can't see the card. Let me get him on the screen. So like Lucius Galloway's ability, after you successfully evade an enemy by 2 or more, discover 1 clue at your location. We're going to be using our foot to evade enemies, but because we're not killing enemies and rather we're evading enemies to get clues, we're not really hyper-fixating on drawing a weapon in our opening hand, because 1, we are a clover, so that is our role, but 2, because enemies, we have other ways to benefit from them, and it's not just by killing them. So, the question is, what are we looking for as a clover? And let's go a bit deeper. What are we looking for generally as a player in our mulligan, what we generally look for first before anything else, this is just kind of in a vacuum. There are exceptions to this rule, but the thing we're generally looking for are assets. The reason for this is that the earlier you play an asset, the more use you get out of that asset, right? Like, if there is, let's just say, 16 turns in this ARKHAM Horror scenario, if I get my asset out on turn 1, I can play it for all 16 turns. If I get it out on turn 10, I can only play it for 6 turns. So the value of that asset immediately goes down. So it's the thing that we're looking for first. However, with that said, not all assets are the same. Some assets, let's say, for example, Dr. Malone Christopher, artistic inspiration, maybe pickpocketing, string along, maybe like magnifying glass, are all good assets that you want to see early. In some cases, you have, especially if you're a seeker, you're going to have cards that you're going to want to get out and make sure you're able to translate, in the case of these research cards, by the end of the scenario. So this is another consideration that you're going to have for your mulligan. But you have to look at cards like Dial of the Ancients, where it does nothing on its own, so it doesn't actually help you win the scenario. So how critical is it to your mulligan? And the answer to that question is what else is surrounding it. This is going to make a little bit more sense when we actually start doing the test mulligans, so we'll just like hold our horses for that. Additionally, I see people keep economy in their opening hands, and I think that that is a fair thing to do, especially if your deck is higher on the curve, which we can look at. If you build your deck, you can check out your curve with this resource cost here. So you can see that this deck hovers around 15 cards or 2 and 3. So that is a moderately high curve. Like, that's on the higher end of the curve that we have here. This is, again, a consideration for your mulligan. If your deck runs a little bit higher, like maybe if you're sitting at 9 cards at 3 or 4, your emergency caches or your economy might be more important for your mulligan. But with this one, I mean, we have to see it in action, right? Generally, skills you don't need to keep in your mulligan. These guys, unless there are exceptions, for example, if you are Silas Marsh, or another skill-based investigator like maybe Amanda Sharp or Isabel Barnes, like from the new core, if I can go with a more modern example. Those actually will sometimes change the metrics for these skill cards. But in this Lucius deck, we can look at these cards. We can actually honestly look at these 7 cards. Where's the Party, Backstab, Elusive, Deduction, Guts, Manual, Dex, Perception as free mulligans. They don't exist. They're basically basic weaknesses in the initial 5 cards that we see. But what am I looking for in the mulligan here? The answer to that question is very simple. I have 3 cards that I want to see, 2 of which are the priority. Magnifying Glass, Dr. Malone Christopher. The reason for this is that these 2 together allow me to investigate at 6. The third option that I want to hit is Dial of the Ancients, but it's not a priority compared to some of the other cards that I might see, especially if I have Dial of the Ancients but no Magnifying Glass and Dr. Malone Christopher. I might mulligan it away for Magnifying Glass or Dr. Malone Christopher. So that's kind of the general looking at this deck. You ask, what is the goal? You look, what are the important pieces of my deck? How much does my deck cost? Again, looking at the curve. Curve is a complicated thing, but I highly recommend after you build your deck, especially on ARKHAM Build. I know ARKHAM DB also has this, but you can look and see your curve, study it, become familiar with it. It's going to help you determine how you approach your turns and even how you approach, it's like how you approach every decision you make in ARKHAM. A lot of it is going to come back to your curve. So with all this said, I think it's a good time for us to dive into this mulligan thing, which actually also has a draw simulator on ARKHAM Build, which is super great. So let's draw our opening 5 cards. So what are we looking at here? We're seeing, can I make these bigger? I can't. Okay, that's all right. So we have a Where's the Party, a Deduction, a Forensics Kit, and a Perception. I like, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of this mulligan, but I do like one of the cards here, this Forensics Kit. Spend a supply, investigate. For this investigation, you may use foot instead of book. You get +1 skill value if succeed, and there is an exhausted enemy at your location. Heal 1 horror. I don't care about that horror thing. I mean, it is going to be something we are going to have to care about for Lucius, but in the mulligan, when I'm looking at my first turn of Arkham, what do I want to do? I told you, I want to investigate. So I'm going to keep 1 of these forensics kits, and then we're going to redraw the selection. And now look at that. See, like, this is... We were aggressive. We saw the 1 card that we wanted to keep, and we got rid of everything else. Now, I think that's the thing that I can say is the biggest piece of advice that I can give you as a player when it is mulliganing, is you need to mulligan aggressively to find what you have. So in that situation, I saw 1 card that I deemed as important, and that was because it helped me do my main goal, which was investigate. I was then throwing away 4 other cards, so I only kept 20% of my opening hand, and then turned it into a magnifying glass, a pickpocketing to help us draw more cards, which was just a lucky get, and an emergency cache. And then also, I mean, a guts to keep us safe, but we're not going to, again, these cards basically don't exist for this mulligan conversation. But being able to play Francis Kit and Magnifying Glass means that we are able to get to 6 Shroud for 4 Shroud, like 6 book for 4 Shroud locations, and also just be at 5 for 3 Shroud locations, which is very good on standard difficulty. So, let's try that again. Let's do another exercise here. So let's draw 5. This hand's perfect. This hand's, it's gas. This hand is gas. So, what are we keeping here, right? We're going to be keeping the Magnifying Glass and the Dr. Milan Christopher, and I'm going to think a little bit about the artistic inspiration, but first I have a question from the chat that I want to answer. Is there ever a world where you keep perceptions to help with early investigators and they essentially cycle themselves? No, I will very rarely, unless I have a skill synergy card within my hand, keep a perception in my opening hand. I know it does cycle itself, and I think that's a very good use case for perception. I think the use case that you were describing and asking here is a good time to use perception. But when you look at your opening hand, you get to try to find the 5 best cards on turn 1. That's kind of what you want to look for in your mulligan, right? I want to find the 5 best cards that I can play on turn 1. And perception doesn't really necessarily help you on turn 1. It can help you down the road, but it's one of those things that I would rather draw that later and then cycle through later, as opposed to try to play that immediately unless I had some skill synergy with it. So with that in mind, let's actually put that onto this conversation. What cards help us here on turn 1? So obviously Magnifying Glass and Dr. Milan Christopher are going to stay. Flashlight and Where's the Party? They're not going to really help us on turn 1. Flashlight is in this deck ultimately for redundancy, acting as another case of Magnifying Glass, right? Like it's another card that helps us investigate high shroud locations. Artistic Inspiration is a very interesting card here. So what does Artistic Inspiration do? If we're asking this and we're looking at this deck list here, is that this card will help us pass tests or let us be a little bit more defensive. However, it does require us to discard cards from our hand, which means that it's going to be a little bit slow while we're setting up. So if we go back to that question, does it help us on turn 1? The answer is no, and we just redraw selection. What we're really looking for, what we're really hoping on this mulligan on here, is an emergency cache, because then we can play the Magnifying Glass, the Dr. Milan Christopher, investigate to get a resource, putting us back to 1, and then ultimately using an emergency cache to get to 4 for our last action. So let's see if we get lucky with that. We didn't, but that's okay. So again, we look at these other 2 cards, these like the guts, and the string along. There's not really anything exciting here, but this is a good foundation to get us through the turns after turn 1. But what matters is that our role is set. We're going to be able to, in the first turn, play Magnifying Glass, play Dr. Milan Christopher, and just hit the ground running, get going, get the money to play string along, start getting card draw, defend ourselves in the Mythos phase. These are the latter part of the mulligan. This is like the main part that we have here. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Perceptions are the glue. The skill cards are the glue that make your deck run quicker, but they're not necessary for your survival. All right, let's do another one. Let's do one more because these are fun. All right, this one should be pretty easy, right? If you look at this here, what are you going to be keeping? I'm only keeping the Dr. Milan. I'm getting rid of everything else because Dr. Milan helps us on turn 1. The things down the road are not going to help us as much here. Like, I can see why people might be tempted to keep the Perception because it allows you to deal with an enemy. But you know what also allows you to deal with an enemy? 5 foot. You have 5 foot as Lucius Galloway, so like you can just evade enemies. The majority of evasions are going to be 3 or less, or your fighter is going to be there to handle enemies. I am the Clover, it is not my job, so we can redraw the selection. And this is when you can kind of see that we have the redundancy in our deck, makes us more likely to hit a Dr. Milan. But now we're going to be at 5 book, which covers a lot of 3 shroud locations, and we also have the Book of Verse, which is a really good thing here. We can play Dr. Milan Christopher, we can investigate, maybe with the deduction if we're feeling a little bit naughty, and then play out the Book of Verse with the money we got from Dr. Milan. I think this is, again, a really good start, and that's what we're looking for when we're mulliganing. Medieval M, thank you so much for the sub. Welcome to the Golden Table. Okay, I think that is all sorted here. Let's now go to this current Skids deck. So, let's talk about something else that I haven't talked about yet, which is this number right here. So every investigator's deck is 30 cards for the cards that you have a choice to put into your deck. But you also always have a basic weakness and your signature weakness. And occasionally you're going to have an investigator that has more of a signature, more of a weakness. Or you're going to have story assets that are going to go into your deck, or you're going to have permanents, which don't come into the conversation here, but we can see in this Skids deck that I actually have Archibald Hudson, which was a story reward that I got for playing Midwinter Gala. This is going to impact your mulligan decisions a lot, because the more cards you have in your deck, the less likely you are to see the cards that you really want to see in your opening hand. So, just something to keep in mind, but we're not going to factor it too much into the major decisions here. Let's ask ourselves the question. Let's start with that. What is our goal? Well, this deck obviously is the goon. We're here to kill people. We are the fighter. We are here to play weapons and then shoot weapons and kill people. So because of that, we have some weapons in our deck. We have the Derringer, the Mauser, the Luger. And we also have Robert Castaigne to give us a fist boost and also allow us to use these weapons with his ability. We have some card draw and card selection with Lucky Cigarette Case. We have Wolf Mask to make us better at what we're doing. We have String Along for more card draw. We have economy in the form of emergency cash, Stand Together. We have 1 copy of extra ammunition to kind of be more of the gun that we want. And then we have more damage in the form of Vicious Blow and Hunter's Mark. So, what are we looking for in our mulligan? Again, what are we looking for on turn 1? In a perfect world, we want Robert Castaigne, a gun. In a super perfect world, we also want Lucky Cigarette Case and Wolf Mask. If I was able to build my perfect mulligan here, I would take Robert Castaigne, the Mauser, Lucky Cigarette Case, Wolf Mask, and probably the Stand Together for the economy. This is an exercise that I highly suggest you try doing. Build your deck, and before you play your deck, look at your deck and ask yourself, what is the perfect mulligan? If I could choose 5 cards from my deck to be in my opening hand at the start of every scenario, what would those 5 cards be? What are the cards that give me the best chance at winning the scenario if I'm able to have them in my opening hand at turn 1? Those questions are going to do a very good job of helping you as a player understand the priority of your mulligan and what you push for and what you just throw to the side. So, let's do this. 5 cards. Okay. Now, I will say, this is actually something that Derby K said in his article, is that when you have bad mulligans consistently, right, when you feel like you're always mulliganing badly, it's going to point to 2 things. 1, it's not luck. 1 is that you're making bad mulligan decisions or you're making bad decisions with your deck. It's kind of like what it is. If you're always feeling like your mulligans are bad, you have to look at those 2 things first, because that is, you're likely making some sort of mistake somewhere, And the question is, what is that mistake? And the only way to figure that out is by continuing to examine and try to discover and like basically critique yourself as you're building and playing. I'm only saying this because this Skids deck did have a lot of issues in its mulligan. And I think it's because I was a current deck that relied on a lot of crucial pieces. So that's why I also wanted to bring this here, because I think this deck actually kind of faltered. Oh, sorry, I lost my mulligan. Okay, well, let's, you know what, we're just going to go again. I would have kept Robert Castaigne there and throw away everything else, just for context. You can't go back to the deck. All right, so we're looking at this opening hand. The Luger is a very slow gun, but it is a gun, so we probably have to keep it. Hunter's Mark is more damage, but it's not really a necessity. Archibald Hudson allows us to search out enemies to gain resources. That honestly seems pretty bad when our only weapon of choice is a Luger, and then we have an E-Cache and an Evidence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the Luger and I'm going to redraw everything else. Okay, so this is not a killer opening hand, but the Luger in combination with Wolf Mask and the Foot is going to do enough for Skids to at least be able to handle the enemies while he digs for some better stuff. This is also a big reason why melee weapons are so nice, is because you can kind of just set them and forget them. But because this was a Robert Castaigne deck, I had these issues that I came with it. So you probably have noticed by now, let's do another 5, that I mulligan very aggressively. Like I am mulliganing on average 3 or 4 cards for each of my mulligans. That's usually what ends up happening. Obviously the scenario factors into this, but I think this is just a case of showing that if you're not mulliganing like 4 cards all the time, it's not that you're necessarily doing something wrong, but if you find that you are not finding the start that you want and you're not mulliganing like 80% or like 60% of your mulligan each round, each game, ask yourself why that's happening. All right, so obviously we're keeping Robert Castaigne, redrawing everything else. This is a rough mulligan. And see, this is what I was talking about, how I had the issues with this, where if we look at the deck again, maybe we can use this as a critique that this deck probably should have had the 45 automatic as well, right? Like maybe instead of this mano to mano that I often find myself sucking from the corrupted teat of its influence, this was just a 45 automatic, we would have had a better start instead. And this is what I'm talking about being critical, because we saw 2 mulligans, well, really 2.5, and we only saw 1 gun that was worthy of keeping. So let's try that again. Okay, Robert Castaigne, a Luger, a string along, a daring maneuver. Now, I'm keeping Robert Castaigne for sure, and I'm keeping a Luger. But I'm going to be throwing away the other Luger because it doesn't actually do too much to really help me with what I want to be doing, which is finding better guns to shoot with all the time. So let's redraw that selection. And that's a much better opening hand. We're looking for Lucky Cigarette Case, and it's going to make us sing. So we're going to play, our first turn is going to be Robert, Lucky Cigarette Case, E-Cache. We're going to hold the Luger back until we have to play it, and we can use Robert Castaigne to fire the Luger for free, and then also play it and fire it again, which I think would be pretty neat. All right, let's do one more. How's it going, Astute? All right, so this is the best hand we've seen. This is the best hand we've seen. We have a Wolf Mask, a Robert, a Vicious Blow, an Archibald, and a Mauser. So I'm going to keep the Robert. I'm going to keep the Mauser. So this is something that never actually came up in any of our examples, but sometimes your assets have priority. So we lost the mulligan, but we knew what we were going to keep there. Sometimes your weapons have priority. So if my opening hand had a Mauser, a Luger, and then like 3 other cards, I would keep the Mauser and throw away the Luger in a hope to find Robert Castaigne. All right, let's hop over to this Dark Matter Miguel deck that I'm playing currently through Dark Matter, which I will say eventually is going to be on our more PBG channel. There's some changes coming to the channel here in the near future, and a big thing from that is that Arkham Gameplay is going to be moving to another channel. It's crazy, I know, but the times they are changing. So if you want to pay attention to see this Dark Matter, you should follow our Arkham Horror channel, which hopefully I remember to include a link to in this video description or in the video itself. Okay, let's talk about this deck. Dark Matter Miguel. This is kind of a flexy deck. He was paired up with an Andre Patel, and we are trying to get clues and kill enemies, but we're leaning more towards the enemy side of things. So this deck is a survivor deck, and survivors, they mulligan slightly differently than other investigators, where their cards are kind of just always there and always applicable. So we're going to be mulliganing a little bit differently here. So I'm going to be quick on this. What's our goal? Our goal is to fight enemies and get clues. There are 2 cards that we're looking for, I think, in our mulligan here. I guess 3. Longbow, Daniel Jameson, or our 1 copy of Track Shoes, Glassing, and then I suppose the 3rd one is probably Loner, just for the action efficiency. Sorry, the 4th one is actually Loner, just for the action efficiency it gives us. So let's see what we got here. Also, once again, pay attention to the curve. A lot of 1s here, so this is our lowest curve deck that we've seen so far. Let's see our mulligan. Okay, all right, this is a fun exercise. This is a fun exercise that we have here. So I want you to take a few seconds and I actually would love to see from chat. And there's no, this isn't like a test. There isn't a wrong answer here. But what are you keeping in this opening hand? Because again, there's not really like a wrong answer to this question, but it's a good kind of thing to see where things align. While you're answering this question for yourself at home, I want to just talk about Miguel and his ability. You may take an additional action during your turn, which can only be used to play an event. We have 2 events in our opening hand that are actually emergency cash level 2, which means that they're kind of free. They become something else, which is kind of really good. Especially, this is a thing where the investigator abilities kind of add an additional flair to this kind of thing, which is ultimately really cool and can impact our mulligan decision. So because of that, in this opening hand, this is going to be probably our most conservative mulligan yet, I'm going to keep the longbow and both emergency caches, which seems crazy to keep 2 emergency caches because they don't actually do anything. But now we have 6 free resources over 2 turns and 2 additional cards. They're going to replace themselves. So we're just going to redraw these ones. Yeah, and then we got a lucky 3. So yeah, this is a killer opening hand. I probably could win a scenario with this opening hand. Just looking at this right here. All right, let's try that again. This longbow is sticky, huh? This is some sticky longbowage. All right, I'm going to ask the same question. What are people keeping here? Because I think that take a few seconds, kind of ask yourselves, what would you get rid of? What would you keep? Because I can look at this and I know exactly what I'm keeping and exactly what I'm getting rid of. So with this hand, I'm going to be keeping longbow, glassing, and hidden shelter. And then I'm going to be mulliganing away the lucky and the makeshift trap. So the reason for this is that I told you that glassing was one of the crucial cards in my deck. The reason for this is it gets clues like crazy. It allows us to investigate at 5, 6 if we have Daniel Jameson or the Track Shoes, which we are looking for with these other 2 cards. But the other reason for this is because we can recur this card. So the sooner we get a copy of Glassing into play, the sooner we can get Glassing into our discard pile, the sooner we can start using Glassing to get clues in ungodly levels to start winning the scenario. Hidden Shelter is here is because it's an event. We're going back to Miguel de la Cruz. This card is going to replace itself and give economy to our team. They're going to draw cards, gain resources, and just basically have additional cards in their opening hand, which is really, really powerful. We will then redraw this and see what we got here. Improvised weapons, fine. Stock prey is also, I mean, it works with glass in the future, but these 3 cards are going to give us a very good foundation to build off of. Yes, so I mean, yeah, Nescient Detective, that is exactly what we're going to be going with that. It's also going to be something that's going to be referred to a lot, where the channel, like we're not going to leave people in the dark for when stuff is going to the other channel. Do not worry about that. Basically, we're changing the PBG main channel to focus on strategy for board games, and then making the more PBG being for like the gameplay of those board games, just to kind of give the channel a little bit more of a direction, if that makes sense. All right, let's do another mulligan here with Miguel. A Migueligan, if you will. Okay, I mean, this should be pretty obvious of what I'm keeping here. And again, this one, as you can see, I mean, this longbow is sticky. We're seeing this longbow in every opening hand, which is kind of sick. Okay, this is a very interesting thing here. So, I'm actually going to only mulligan away the timely intervention. This is a weird one, right? But again, improvised weapon is, it replaces itself, and we're going to want to get it into our discard pile ASAP. Timely intervention is good defensively, but we don't really need it. We can play hidden shelter on turn 1 after the longbow, get a resource which we can use to help play with track shoes, right? So that's what I'm talking about, how like this is an insane opening hand. This hand wins the scenario. Like, this hand wins the scenario. This is what I'm talking about, how the survivors mulligan differently, and we can see this in the other decks because survivors power level, especially at 0, is just, their power level is less of a sharp curve, right? So it's like one of those things where you can see this here. This is even a good exercise for me. I'm learning a lot even more about doing this. All right, here's our first tough this is our first tough little choice here. So I'm gonna kind of lean again. You at home and people watching on chat, what would you do here? What would you do here? Yeah, that's kind of why we're doing it, to kind of make our channel more focused and help with the algorithm. The More Playing Board Games actually already exists. If you search More Playing Board Games on YouTube, you'll be able to find the channel right now if you wanted to get a head start on subscribing. This is a tricky one. I think that we go back to the question of what are we looking for in our opening hand, and ultimately we're really only finding one card here that really, really makes this sing. I think what I would keep in this case, the Hunter's Instinct is calling my name. This is a very big thing to keep, but it's also a big commitment because it actually doesn't do anything on its own right now. I think I'd keep one improvised weapon so I could at least kill an enemy if I got one on turn 2. Okay. So yeah, this is our worst mulligan that we've seen so far, but I think with the hidden shelter, and then we have the improvised weapon to deal a bunch of damage, the Hunter's Instinct, if we want to get back the improvised weapon or the hidden shelter, this is our worst mulligan that we've seen so far, but I do think that this is a good way of making the best of a bad situation. And this, again, is where you would want to click the link to the video where it was, how do you get over a bad mulligan? Because I wouldn't say this is an awful mulligan, but it's definitely the worst mulligan we've seen so far. All right. Now, let's go to this Carson Sinclair deck. This is a deck that I brought to a patron game day that had 4 players, so you're able to do some wild stuff. And with this one, it was Carson Sinclair as 100 men, a normal sentence for people to read. And I brought this to just be like the ultimate support deck of just healing people, getting clues, poking enemies, and just keeping the team alive, throwing some dynamite blasts. So support decks, especially in 4 players, are kind of hard to figure out exactly what am I looking for in the mulligan, but we should start there. What's our role? Support. So we want to heal, help our teammates be the best they can be, which luckily Carson kind of already has printed on his investigator ability, so that does kind of influence the mulligan a little bit here. But we're also looking for our ways to deal damage and or horror. There is one card, and if you know me, you know the card that I'm looking for. Stand Together is the instant must keep. Like, it's not even a question. If Stand Together 3 is in my opening hand, it basically bumps up your win rate by like a point or 2 if you're able to resolve this, depending on like the number of players that you have determines the number of time, like the amount of like points that it goes up. But this one here is like the non-negotiable. We have to keep this card. It helps other people. The best question to ask after you, like when you draw Stand Together, is who isn't happy with their mulligan, and then you help them be a little bit happier with the mulligan by giving them 2 extra cards and 2 extra resources. Beyond that, Again, this is a very weird deck. As I said, the decks were going to get weirder and weirder as we go. I think the only thing I would really love to hit is an agency backup, because getting this out, and then also obviously Hallowed Mirror would be nice as well, but Hallowed Mirror is only a one of, so it's going to be a little bit trickier. This is also when we're going to have to deal with this Devil. So every time we're looking at getting rid of cards, we need to now start asking ourselves, how much are we worried about this becoming Devil, right? And that's a new question that we haven't had to ask before, but it should be pretty interesting. Curve here is actually relatively low. I know that we have some 7s, some 5s, some 3s, but if you look at the majority of our cards, like 15 of our cards are 0 or 1. So just something to keep in mind. All right, boom. All right, this one, we're going to look at the impact on turn 1. And really only one card here has that impact, which is Safeguard. But the question is, do you keep Safeguard? And the answer to that question, I think, again, is kind of influenced by Devil. How much of a concern do I have for Devil? And the answer is, I would rather have Safeguard over Devil, even if I wanted to dig a little bit deeper in my mulligan, but Devil changes the mulligan math a little bit. So we're going to kill all of these cards. And not a great start here. Like, this is not a mulligan that you're really happy with. But because I'm the support, the deck's a little bit weird, I'm able to kind of manage it and probably dig through my deck while helping the other teammates do well as well. So, something to keep in mind, especially when we start looking at these more zany combo decks. Give me a 5, please. Okay, this hand's great, right? This hand is awesome. We have the agency backup, the stand together. We just throw these away and turn them into something else. I mean, what I really would love to see is Hallowed Mirror and another stand together. E-Cash is fine, right? So this turn is we give away an action. We play stand together. We drop agency backup, and then we give another action, or alternatively, we play emergency cash. And we also now have the Calling in Favors to load this guy up with some damage and some clue, some damage and some horror, and then pick him up with Calling in Favors and hopefully find another guy. Let's drop another one of these. All right, so now we have the Devil. This is a great thing that we have here to talk about. So what would you keep here? Interesting question, right? We have to keep the Devil. We have to keep agency backup. We have to keep emergency cash. I don't need to keep the Calling in Favors because the Calling in Favors can come and do its impact later. If I draw that on like turn 7, it'll kind of hit the same way as if it'll have the same effect if I drew it on turn 7 as opposed to keeping it in my hand on turn 1 and essentially just like running with it in my hand the whole time. Dynamite Blast we don't need until the late game, so we'll just redraw these two and hopefully we hit a stand together. We had a Voice of Ra, which is pretty sick. Like this is going to help us get out of the hole. So on our first turn, we play Emergency Cash. We drop down Devil. We obviously give an action and we play Voice of Ra. And just told the guys, hey, just so you know, I'm going to be a little bit slow on helping you guys, but once I hit the ground running, we're going to be singing. All right. Let's do another one. Okay, I mean, this should be pretty obvious what we keep here. We keep the stand together, redraw everything else, hope to find either Hallowed Mirror or agency backup. Okay, that's a pretty rough opening go there, but we hit the stand together, so we're going to see 2 more cards. So yeah, again, the weird decks that are doing weirder things are going to mulligan worse. One thing to keep in mind, if you're in 4 players, it's a little bit easier to mulligan. You have to be less aggressive than you are in 2 players. But it's actually kind of fun where you can see like the different levels of efficiency for these decks. The more complicated they are, the worse they mulligan. And that's just the natural case of things. Yeah, Hallowed Mirror is pretty sick. We'll redraw everything else. Yeah, that's a killer opening hand. We have the Devil, so it's going to eat one of our actions, but now it's done. Now it's done. Okay. Last deck we have here is this parallel Jim Culver deck that I brought through the campaign play along into the Innsmouth Conspiracy. This was a ridiculous combo deck where we use the Armageddon and Rod of Carnimagos and Curse tokens to kind of just have a great time cheesing on the game a little bit. Because it's also Parallel Jim, we have a set of allies that actually help with our consistency. But because these are not our mulligans, and we have a 1 in, I think, 1 in 10 chance of hitting each of them, we can't really rely on these guys in our game plan in our opening mulligan, so they're not going to impact things. Because we also have this Vengeful Shade, who we can also potentially see on turn 1. So just some considerations for that. So, what are we looking for in our mulligan here? Another thing quickly as well, let's look at the curve of this deck. It's a zany one, but I think a lot of this is also being kind of like swayed by the allies that we have here. But our key assets are a bit expensive that we got here. Armageddon, Eye of Chaos, these are not cheap cards, right? Like, these cards are pretty expensive. So then we have to look at our economy, which admittedly is actually quite low. So like, we look at this card here where, like, I don't even have emergency cash in this deck. We just have the 1 Voice of Ra. So we then can look at our guys over here, but you see that none of them really actually also give resources, which this is a little bit sus. I'm going to be honest with you. It's a little bit suspect of what we're looking at here, but this deck did kill it, so I obviously must have done something right. But if we're looking back at it now, it does seem a little bit light on the resources that we have here. Because we don't even have a Favor of the Moon. Where the hell did I get my resources in this deck? That's a great question. Yeah, because we even have the Bulletproof Vest, but that's because I took some trauma at the start. So yeah, all these choices, but again, these are all choices that you're going to have to make, and why campaign decks, like decks that you play versus campaign, as opposed to decks that you're playing in a standalone, like this Carson deck, are different than they would be otherwise. So all these considerations, let's ask that question again. What are we looking for? Armageddon, Rod of Carnimagos, Voice of Ra. These are like the 3 important cards. I'd love to have an Ikiak in my opening hand as well, but I think the last one, it could be like a Lucky or a control variable. Alternatively, an Esoteric Method would also go pretty hard, so I could get some curse tokens in the bag. Alright, let's see our 5 here. Okay, what's the mulligan here? So with this one, this is when we start to get really aggressive. This card hit really none of the things that I said I needed. Ikiak and Esoteric Method were both an I'd love to have it, but the sentence of I'd love to have it has the question of, did I get what I would get before? It's kind of like, yeah, I'd love to eat cake for dinner, but I probably, you know, should eat the regular stuff first. So they don't make the cut. This is actually a full 5, and you're right, Astute. The Rod does give money on death. So we're going to mulligan the full 5 here. We have the Rod of Carnimagos, and then we just need to... So this is also a deck that played with another deck playing curse cards, so I don't need to get the curses in entirely. But we can see here the Rod of Carnimagos. If we get some curses, we're going to at least start getting to a good start, and then we can use the Guts and other things to start trying to get through aggressively. But we don't have a way to activate the Guts, so this is, I would consider to be a pretty rough mulligan. So let's see again. Boom. This is a tough one. This is a tough one. All right, we're going to get rid of the Sword Cane and the control variable for sure. I think we also get rid of the Voice of Ra for right now, because the only asset that we're playing is the Rod of Carnimagos, right? The Esoteric Method is nice because it enables the Rod of Carnimagos. So I think we're going to keep this. If this was an Armageddon, I probably would not keep the Esoteric Method. Yeah, this hand's all right. This hand will give us a good start, right? We can play Rod of Carnimagos. We can wait till we draw an enemy to get the Sword Cane. We have an Esoteric Method to start loading up the Rod of Carnimagos. We get to 10, we have the Stygian Eye. I think that this would get us to... I'm not like confident that we could run out the rest of the scenario with this. We were going to be digging hard for the Armageddon. But this is, I think, a really, really nice start. This is a start that we can have a good go with. Okay, here's the Armageddon. We have an Esoteric Method, Jim's Trumpet, which is a very nice card, Bulletproof Vest, and Stygian Eye. So these 2 are easy mulligans because we don't need them on turn 1, right? Again, going back to that last question, do we need it on turn 1? Jim's Trumpet, it's nice, but I don't think we need it. And I talked about how Esoteric Method, if I have the Rod of Carnimagos, I'm keeping it, but I wouldn't do the same for an Armageddon. So I think we just redraw these. yeah. So another thing that this is fine. I mean, we have the Armageddon, which we have the Armageddon. We're going to be fine for enemies. We got some economy. We got some protection. We got this to save on actions, so we can use this to move. And basically, the first action we play with this, then the move actions become draw actions, which again goes beyond the mulligan and the scope of this video, but just for some consideration. But again, we're going back to the 47 card total. I mean, a bunch of those are just our allies in our side deck, but it is something to consider. Rod of Carnimagos is nice. I think we redraw everything else. Yeah, this hand's fine. This will get us there. And this is kind of like, again, this was kind of a combo deck because, again, we want the Rod, Armageddon, and then we can start going crazy. Hitting both of those on the mulligan is the dream. Is it going to happen? Who knows? Yeah, this would be a full mull for me. Redraw the selection. Fae does nothing we care about. We don't need to be protected at the start of the game. We're happy to see them on the latter half of our mulligan, but not like our main mulligan. Ikiak is nice, but she doesn't help us win on turn 1 if an enemy shows up. Voice of Ra is good, but right now, currently, we don't have anything to play, so I'm okay if we just redraw that. Because we're looking for... Not this! Not this! I'll tell you that much. Ikiak is nice to at least give us for that, but we don't have any way to fight enemies here. So that's going to leave us in a little bit of a rough go. My teammate for this deck was a Lucius. So Lucius was able to evade things while I got set up. And this is, again, where things get complicated. But we're looking at this in a vacuum from the mulligan, and that's where things would be. Let's redraw one more time. Yeah, this is going to be another full. And yeah, this is a nice start. Sword, Cane, Rod. So the Sword, Cane, Rod we've seen, that's enough to at least get us going. So, yeah. Okay. Everybody? Hopefully, this was a helpful video in terms of the question of, like, the questions you should ask when it comes to when you finish your deck. Ask yourself about your mulligans, and use the tools that exist here in Arkham Build to learn your deck inside and out, right? Look at your curve. Ask yourselves, what are your important assets? Do some practice mulligans, right? We have a magnifying glass. Again, going back to the first one, it helps us do our thing. 2 magnifying glasses, we're fine, right? We're going to be at 6 for investigating, right? Well, you know what the main goal of your deck is, and then you can look at to see what are the important pieces to help you do your main goal. Right, again, the simplest deck has been the simplest mulligans, and actually, honestly, the most consistent mulligans, because, again, simple means that you're going to have a better chance of winning. But, yeah, hopefully this helped. Hopefully it was some good guidance. If you have any questions about the mulligan, or if you want to see another edition of this in the future where I try it with even more decks, you can let me know as well. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you learned some cool stuff about mulliganing and about maybe why you should be more aggressive with your mulligans, why you might keep cards, why you might, like, just some cards are automatic. I don't need to see this in my mulligan. I'm going to get rid of it all the time. And maybe you'll start, if you haven't been doing, like, 4-card mulligans, maybe you're like, ooh, maybe I should start trying, like, mulliganing, like, 4 or 5 cards to just dig deep and dig aggressive for what I need. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and as always, GG's.